Well, good morning. Today is Saturday, April 18th, and we are in the season of Easter. It began last Sunday, Easter Sunday, although in some ways that seems like that was almost a month ago. But it is a designation of something that happens in our lives each and every day. God is always about rebirthing Easter in us. Promise, resurrection. But in the church year, we have a season that is designated and set aside as Easter season. It began last Sunday, and it continues until May 31st, when we will celebrate Pentecost. So tomorrow we will be back with the disciples, and I want to just share a few verses from our passage for tomorrow, from the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 19. It was still the first day of the week. That evening, while the disciples were behind closed doors because they were afraid of the Jewish authorities, Jesus came and stood among them. He said, "Peace be with you." You know, as I have been reading and preparing with this passage, I can't help but draw many parallels to our situation in our lives. Jesus finds these disciples huddled behind locked doors. It's identified as fear. Fear because of what they saw that the authorities did to Jesus, and the fear that they would be next. But I think it also was an overwhelming sense of grief. It was a grief for a friend. One who for 3 years was their constant companion. It was a grief for possibility. They saw the end of their hope that life would be changing, that God was about a new thing. And it was a grief in the sense that they were being asked to enter into life that now would not seem changed, and they were grieving what was different, what might not ever be, and such a deep loss of the time that they had shared. Without him, they weren't sure, even with all the teaching he did before he went to the cross. They just weren't sure. Weren't sure how they could continue, to live into that. And so I think even though we identify it as fear, I think we have to acknowledge that it was also grief. Fear and grief, two very strong emotions, can alter our brain chemistry. And they can cause our bodies to undergo all sorts of physiological changes rapidly. It can actually bring on a sense of being unwell. Too much fear, too much grief over long periods of time can damage hearts and brains. Today I want to acknowledge the grief that we too are feeling. And sometimes we feel guilty because we are watching around us. In Minnesota, the horrific jump in deaths yesterday. We are grieving for those families. We are grieving for those that are concerned about infecting their own families as they care for others. We're also grieving many things in our own lives. But we feel guilty if we express that because of the larger issue, the larger sadness, the larger horror going on around us. You know, we're upset about canceled events. We have graduating seniors whose families, whose teachers, whose administrators have walked this long journey with them. And now they wonder, will they be able to celebrate this end of one part of their life and to celebrate the beginning of a new chapter in their life? We're grieving some of our normal activities. Having a meal out once in a while. Just a change of scenery. Sitting with others in conversation. And yet we feel as if this kind of grief is a personal luxury we can't afford as we look around us. We shouldn't be putting grief in hierarchies. When we feel an emotion, maybe someone else won't understand it, it's real. And it is valid. Those feelings matter. And it does us more harm than good to push down the fact that we have many things, changes in life right now that we are grieving. There's a therapist, her name is Thema Bryant Davis, and she has been giving advice on how, in this time of COVID-19, that we can honestly deal with some of the sadness we're feeling and some of the griefs we're encountering. And she says to sit down and to list those losses. Might be a social event we're missing. Might be professional opportunities, workshops that we were going to, things that we were going to be a part of that we're missing. For each one of us, it will be a different list about how we are personally affected by this COVID-19 crisis, this epidemic. She says, make the list and then sit with those feelings. And then she says, find a way to honor this loss creatively. Poetry, music. I mean, for some of us, that would be a possibility. Maybe something else will be meaningful for you about a birthday party or another celebration that is being missed. We have seen some creative ways that people are doing that and still honoring our social distancing. But I think we need to acknowledge that we had plans this year. As we came into 2020, a new year before us, we had plans. We had celebrations that were planned of milestones in our lives and in the lives of others. We had plans of family gatherings. We had plans of some of the opportunities that I've mentioned that have been put on hold or maybe even canceled in our work life, in our careers, in our growth and our understanding of what it is that we do in the world. And she suggests that acknowledging them and naming them and honoring them can make a difference in how we walk through this time. Those disciples were grieving. They were grieving too. A loss of someone they loved. They were grieving plans and dreams and hopes and possibilities that they had looked forward to. Yes, they were afraid, but they were also sad. And being locked in together brought them some sense of comfort. And into that, Jesus came. You know that there isn't anything that can keep Jesus from coming into our lives and being with us. There isn't anything that will totally stop our feelings of fear, our feelings of grief. And that's why it's important that we acknowledge them. If you're comfortable, you're with others in your household, you each make your own lists and find a time to share them together, to talk about them, to pray about them. And if you're creative, to create some way to express those emotions. We tend to make emotions and things in life into hierarchies, one more important than another. But if you are the one experiencing this grief, it is important. It isn't less than what someone else is feeling, even though it seems that they are experiencing far more during this pandemic than you are. But your feelings are still valid. Jan Richardson, prolific writer, United Methodist clergy, but runs a Wellspring Center in Florida, suddenly lost her husband, her co-collaborator, her inspiration, without any warning. And she found a way to walk through that, through art, through writing. What is wonderful is that she was willing to share that with us. One of the books that she put together of her poetry as she took this journey of grief is called The Cure for Sorrow, a book of blessings for times of grief. What I'd like to do with you today is to share one of these blessings in this time together this morning. This one is called Enduring Blessing. What I really want to tell you is to just lay this blessing on your forehead, on your heart. Let it rest in the palm of your hand, because there is hardly anything this blessing could say, any word it could offer, to fill the hollow. Let this blessing work its way into you with its lines that hold nearly unspeakable lament. Let this blessing settle into you with its hope more ancient than knowing. Hear how this blessing has not come alone, how it echoes with the voices of those who accompany you, who attend you in every moment, who continually whisper this blessing to you. Hear how they do not cease to walk with you, even when the dark is the deepest. Hear how they encompass you always, breathing this blessing to you, bearing this blessing to you still. It is from Jesus and the Holy Spirit that we receive blessing. We find, as the little girl in the story, that sometimes we need Jesus with skin on. And so I do invite you to share what's going on with you with someone else. Honor what you are grieving. Honor in the midst of that the hope that is held out for a change that will come. And we know it'll be gradual. We know things are not going to go immediately back to normal. And in some ways, it'll be a new normal. It'll be different. It is my prayer that through all that we have learned, through community ways of communicating that have developed, through our awareness of all those who care for us, that before now did not have faces to us, but were behind the scenes. I pray that in our new normal, We will not lose that. So today we honor grief. And tomorrow we will continue this journey, this Easter journey, with those disciples. Amen.